We are live. Hey.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. All right. So, this is a Patreon call because Justin is one of our patrons. Yay. Thank you, Justin. If you are a patron and you want to have a call with us, link to that is in the description. And today, what are we talking about today?
Stoic philosophy.
Mhm. Why are we talking about Stoic philosophy? What is Stoic philosophy?
Yes, it was a previous stream that you had where a viewer asked for your ideas on Stoicism, and you both said you don't know. So I thought this was an interesting opportunity to come on, as I have a Stoic podcast, the Stoic Solutions podcast, where I talk about ancient philosophy in modern times. And Stoicism is typically focusing on having fulfillment in life through building one's character, self-development, finding meaning, finding purpose in life, and working toward a better community around us.
All right. So, what's a summary of what the Stoic philosophy is about? Like a really, for people who have no idea, a very short 1 or 2 line summary of what it teaches.
Yeah, virtue is one of the main topics within Stoicism. We have things like courage, fortitude, resilience. The Stoics want us to build these virtues and character to find fulfillment in life.
Okay, but isn't it okay? Let me do a better job at summarizing it.
You said 1 or 2 sentences. That's tough.
Okay, okay. How about the idea that you should accept what happens in life and don't stress over it, and especially things that you don't have control over. Is that a better summary?
I think that's a good part of it too. Yeah, acceptance is a major theme within Stoicism, and talking about what is inside and outside of our control. The Stoics have this as a major distinction.
That seems to be the main part of it. Like those other the virtues. How many virtues were there? 4 or 5?
Oh well, no, there are lots, but as far as like the cardinal or core virtues, yes, usually around 4 are discussed.
Yeah, like there are the virtues and how one of them I think was wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Like those don't seem to get that much attention. I think the main part of Stoic philosophy that gets the most attention is this understanding of stuff happens, it's okay.
Yeah, it depends on which of the authors you're reading and what you're focusing on. Seneca, for instance, has his moral letters to Lucilius, where he talked a lot about things such as friendship and overcoming fear, overcoming anxiety. We get a lot of these psychological themes in the work of Seneca.
Okay. Okay, let me make sure I have the live chat on my phone so that I can see what our fam is talking about. So
They like the Baby Yoda.
Oh, that's what they're saying in the live chat?
Yeah.
All right, Soha is saying audio is great. Thank you, Soha. All right, so and again, this whole Stoic philosophy, this is what, when somebody says like, "Oh, you're such a Stoic," or something like that, they're not referring to like you being like some of the virtues are being courage and wisdom, right?
I would say kind of, because some people use like the lowercase s Stoic, as if you looked at a dictionary definition, it would typically be thought of as having a stiff upper lip, or some misinterpretations would be without emotion. And I think that's very off. The Stoics acknowledged emotion as part of the human experience, and we don't want to get too caught up in our feelings or too distraught about things. We want to be recognizing our thoughts and feelings for what they are, but not just running with it. We want to have a more logical, more realistic, more in tune with reality perspective about things.
Right, like yeah, I know, but like two of the 4 virtues I think are wisdom and courage, right?
Right.
But when you say somebody is a Stoic, you're not saying that they're wise or courageous. When you're saying somebody's a Stoic, like you're saying that, oh yeah, even if they get cancer, I'm like, yeah, I guess I have no control over this now that I got cancer. Like I'm not gonna worry about it. Life happens. Things are like if you're driving and all of a sudden your engine starts catching fire. If it's me, I'm gonna lose my mind. I'm gonna like, what the hell is happening? like this is going to be expensive. But if you're a Stoic, you're like, hey, my engine is on fire. I guess I have to deal with this right now. Okay, so if somebody is like that, if somebody reacts to it like that, they're Stoic. If somebody reacts like me, starts pulling his hair out, you're gonna be like, that's not very Stoic. Okay, so it's not really like those. I think those other things in Stoic philosophy, they're just like side on the side, like just like, oh, these are other things. But that the main focus is that this whole idea of not letting life, not is it fair to say not taking life too seriously? Is that a fair?
Yeah, many of the authors had a good sense of humor about things and talked about life as a series of games, or analogized. Epictetus, for instance, talks about imitating those who play at dice. He was talking about a dice game where people will throw dice and we have no control over what comes up on the dice, but we can apply skill to what happens. And such as the case with life, that sickness, that war, that exile, all these things might happen around us or to us, but how are we going to react to it? That's the important thing.
By the way, I'm going to criticize Stoic philosophy at some point, but before, I just want to go through these. There was this other philosopher, I don't know who was it, but I remember when I was looking into this, who was about to die or be executed. I don't remember the details, but his family was crying about it. And his response, like, why are you crying over this? All of life deserves all life is a tragedy, not just this final part, right? There seems to be a lot of obsession over not obsessing over death.
I don't know about that particular case, but yes, we're to say that life is just this cycle that's happening, that one time we didn't exist, now we exist, and there'll be a time where we don't exist in the future as well. So understanding that and finding fulfillment where we can, finding meaning while we still have time. The Stoics talk about how life isn't just one grand picnic. It's going to be filled with challenges, and we should know that, and we should accept that, so we don't have our expectations that everything is going to be so wonderful. And then when something happens we don't like, then all of a sudden it's the end of the world, or people who are just scorning life itself. Oh, what a terrible thing life is. Well, what about the good things that come about with life? What about the chance for recovery and things getting better? The Stoics, in many sense, were optimists.
Yeah, but there seems to be this recurring mention of death and dying by the philosophers, and how everything is temporary and life is like, at the end we're all going to go to the same place. Constantly reminding you that death is going to happen, so don't obsess over anything, right? I remember one philosopher. What's that background noise? Is there any way to stop the background noise? No? It's okay. I remember one philosopher mentioning that every time you kiss your loved ones, you're like your children. Remember that you're kissing a mortal.
Yeah, Epictetus.
Oh.
Yeah, so the point of that is that, yes, understand that the life might be temporary, but that doesn't mean that life is worthless or that we don't see others in high esteem. There's, again, lots of talk about community and others, and being not this loner who lives out in the mountains by himself, but rather being part of a community and valuing those and loving those even that we know. That's an important thing.
But it seems to me that that message is suggesting to you that don't even get attached to your children, even, right?
No, I don't think so at all. Just understanding that your children will die at some point or become sick doesn't mean that we just shouldn't care about them. There's a lot of talk in Seneca about a father whose child becomes sick, and if the father would just run away from a child when the child became sick, that would be a dereliction of duty. That's not what one should do. One should stay with their family, and one should stay with others in time of trouble and time of need.
So it's not about complete non-attachment.
It is actually, because you stay not because you're attached to them, but because it's a virtue to do those things.
It's fulfilling a role in many cases. There's a lot of talk about forethought and understanding what we're getting into before we get into it. And there are passages about what marriage, what having children might entail, and the responsibility that comes about with that. So others will depend on you, you'll depend on others. There's this interconnected cosmopolitan view about society. So if we have this capacity to help others and we find ourselves in a role to do that, that's what we should do rather than just retreat and walk away when things get tough.
Yeah, but all of this is because they are a virtue, not because you're attached to them. Like, for example, as my understanding is that if you're a Stoic, if your child dies, you're like, okay, this is a new reality. You don't obsess over the fact that your child dies. It doesn't mean that you like this non-attachment doesn't mean that you don't fulfill your duties as a father. You do those, you fulfill those duties because it's a virtue to do those duties, but not because you're attached to anything.
Yeah, I don't think attachment is really a big thing within the text. They talk about what they call indifference or preferred indifference, and saying that, well, there are these things that could make life better. There's things that I might want, and okay, well, having this high-paying job, or having wealth, or having people who are beautiful, or whatever we might think would be good for us would be nice, but it's not a disaster if those things go away, because at the end of the day, we still have ourselves, we still have our own character, and that's what's inside of our control. Is like, okay, well, it would be nice if I had this nice food for dinner today, but it's not totally necessary that happens. And if for some reason, oh, I couldn't get to the grocery store, or that dinner was spoiled in some way, it's not the end of the world.
That's the difference between Buddhism and Stoicism. Is that how you say it? I think this is why I say Stoic philosophy, because I can never say these things. My tongue is like weak when it comes to but yeah, I don't know. So Stoic philosophy, right? So when it comes to the Buddhism, right? So for example, I sense a suggestion of lack of attachment to things in life. But Stoic philosophy teaches you that you can enjoy wealth, you can enjoy life, but if it doesn't happen, don't let it destroy you. Like, for example, like if you're like, Stoic philosophy doesn't teach you not to enjoy wealth. If you're wealthy, enjoy the wealth that you have, but if you lose it, then that's a new reality that now you have to accept, right?
Right.
Whereas Buddhism, I think, teaches you not to enjoy, just not enjoy it, right?
Yes.
Which is so. Is that a difference that you notice?
Yeah, that is a difference. And from some other philosophical schools, particularly Cynicism, which came before Stoicism, they would say that, well, there are certain things that will just corrupt you, and there's no way out. That once you have money, that this money is going to destroy you. You're going to be all about that. You're going to be all about fame if you happen to get famous, or set your sights on that. But Stoicism calls for moderation in many ways, and maybe similar to Buddhism too, calling for the middle way. I don't know too much about Buddhism, but some things I do know. They're calling for moderation in life, not for an aesthetic life and not for this super luxurious life, but rather somewhere in between, that you could have control over things rather than having things control you.
Right. So Kushik is asking a question. By the way, guys, if you have a question in the live chat, please tag this channel. This channel is being Armin Navabi. So Kushik is saying, what did Stoics think of slaves? I remember when I read about this, it was a virtue to stand against slavery, based according to Stoics. Is that true?
Yes, and there's a lot of talk within Stoic texts talking about treating slaves as humans, as someone that you should share a meal with at the dinner table, and not just cast them to the side. And I think when thinking about ancient philosophy and many other things of their times, just because these topics are discussed doesn't mean that the writers were endorsing them, but rather understanding that they were people of their times and that they were flawed in some ways. And yes, the Stoics in many cases say, no, it's bad to abuse people, it's bad to abuse slaves, treating them as equals, treating them as humans.
So they're not anti-slavery, they just wanted better treatments for slaves?
Well, in some senses, anti-slavery. In some senses, okay, well, here's the current situation. Here are the slaves that you might live with. Treat them well. But I don't recall anything about reading of them calling for slavery or like engaging in that.
One of the virtues is justice, right? Am I right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. One of the four virtues. Matthew saying, how did Stoicism start? What's its origin story?
Yeah, that's a good one. There was a merchant named Zeno, if I'm remembering that correctly. He had a lot of goods on a ship, and he turned out to be shipwrecked. He lost his fortune, he lost all of his wealth, and was wondering what to do. So he asked around, and people told him, oh, you should seek out the philosophers. So from there, Stoicism was born from a man who perceived misfortune but found something much greater after that. So the school of Stoicism, we talk of the painted porch, was a space where philosophers would speak and teach others.
When was this again?
This was ancient Greece, Roman Greece.
So it basically started with a man that lost everything, and he tried to accept this new reality. And now it's like, one thing I noticed is that this idea is this. I don't know if this is a modern interpretation of it or was it the original. But one understanding I have is that you have to treat every struggle as an opportunity. Mm-hmm. Is that something? Is that a theme within Stoic philosophy?
Yeah, someone in the chat mentioned Ryan Holiday, and he talks a lot about this phrase called "the obstacle is the way." Ryan Holiday is a modern Stoic author, talking about, okay, well, we have this challenge in front of us, so instead of despairing, instead of giving up, how could we use this as sort of a lesson to grow? How can we use this as something to test ourselves and recognize that we can become better in many ways?
Nice. Go subscribe to Reason on Faith. We have a celebrity here. Hi, Sohail. Yes, go subscribe to Sohail's channel.
Rita's coming.
He's saying +1 for Stoic philosophy. Lots of wise proponents, past and present. I really enjoy Ryan Holiday's Daily Stoic YouTube channel.
Okay, well, wait until I start criticizing it. I'm gonna start criticizing it very soon, but not yet. Okay.
He has objections and he has grievances.
Festivus all over again.
Yeah.
So this idea of the growth happens through struggle, is that's that when you see if you go cruising through life without any challenges, any difficulties, then you didn't get an opportunity to grow. And as a Stoic, other people see something coming at them that makes their life more difficult, something horrible, they get upset about it. A Stoic sees that and says oh, great, this is an exercising opportunity for me to grow. This is how you become better. If I didn't have challenges like this, I wouldn't have opportunities to grow. A life without challenges is a life not that you don't get to show the virtues that you're trying to strengthen. They only become strength. They compare it to I don't know, metal work where go through heat to become how does that work?
Sure. Yeah, there are a lot of analogies or metaphors or allusions within the text, and there was this talk of what good would Hercules be if he never was able to test his strengths? What good would the Olympic athlete be if he were to only wrestle amateurs? Bring on the challenge. And they said, don't think of it as a madman. Well, I don't want all this misfortune to come about and be afflicted with some great sickness. But if it does happen, well, I'll know how to prepare it. It's like the pilot in the storm that, okay, because you've learned this in your training that you can encounter some of these challenges, can you really ever test all of your mettle, METTLE, here if you haven't encountered that difficulty and storm? They're calling for us to seek out these opportunities, yes, these challenges, to test ourselves and to improve our characters rather than just be someone who lies low, doesn't take on any challenges, avoids any sort of conflict. This talk of Marcus Aurelius, man was not made to just lie in the sheets and just stay in bed all day. Get out there into the world and and do something, right?
Didn't say anything about women, so that sounds. Islam has a similar understanding. At least some form of Islamic preachers have a similar understanding of life struggle.
Jihad.
But no, is not that struggle. Different kinds, misery and pain is an opportunity for you to find God. If your life is too easy, you're going to forget. You're going to become too attached to this life rather than the next life. God, sometimes losing things is God's way of reminding you what it's all about. And then maybe losing your child, losing your wealth, losing everything might be an opportunity for you to detach yourself from this world and focus on Allah. So the teaching is that every misery, every struggle, it should be used as an opportunity to get closer to God. And in that way, misery and life struggles are actually a blessing, rather than like most people treat them as something to fear or be upset about. If you're
This is an opportunity.
It's an opportunity, to go, for you to get closer to Allah. So it just reminded me every time I see something in one philosophy, if I notice it, like in Buddhism or in Islam or in Christianity, if I notice something similar, I like to mention it.
And
just your Abrahamic mindset.
Yeah, and Stoicism would consider it a blessing, but rather events are simply that, events. It's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. It's something that has happened. So what are we to do with it? That's the important thing. And it's not to say, oh, well, hey, someone came up to you and just knocked you over and stole all your money. Oh, you're not saying that's a bad thing? It's saying like, okay, well, that's misfortune. We can call it as that, but it goes away from like good and evil. It's not that like dichotomous thing that you can often see in religious thought.
Yeah, that's actually what I noticed as well. Is like there is like good and like the idea of good and bad is it's not objectively like. It's very interesting that the ancient Greece was treating objective reality as not having anything good and bad. That is like way ahead of its time, right? Like to suggest that what you make of things are good and bad. There's nothing objectively good or bad about the things that you're experiencing. Like you could decide whether it's up to you. If something happens to you, you can decide if this is like something that makes you miserable or not. The event by itself is not inherently good or bad, right?
Right. Yeah, we see this in modern psychology too, in counseling and cognitive behavioral therapy, and the work of Albert Ellis, talking about, well, it's our judgments about things that are the important things. I see the fist pump over there, and
psychology nerds.
Yeah.
Worship Ellis. Okay, that man saved my life. So
nice. Yeah, saying, oh, you think that this might be bad, but that's your thinking about it. I'm not so good at the voice impression, but he often has that like high pitched voice there. But yeah, it's the judgments that we attach to things. As people can catastrophize, people can paint others as, oh, you're this terrible person. Well, why do you think that, right? So Stoicism is calling for us to take a step back and not have these automatic thoughts, but rather be critical of what might just come into our head and not just run with it, and try to step back and say, well, is that person who accidentally bumped into me a bad person, or maybe that was just a mishap? Like what was that, right? Just an easy example there.
Oh, Susanna, go ahead.
Oh, and CBT, but this concept of reframing, where you try to like take yourself outside of your own emotions and reframe it more objectively, which can be, it's also a form of reality testing. Yeah.
So there are 3 comments that tagged the channel. Oh, actually 4, because Qasim didn't notice what channel he's on. I'll go through those, and then I'll start tearing the Stoic philosophy apart.
Watch out.
Okay, Matthew saying, ask Qasim how he got into Stoicism, and who are some of his favorites Stoic writers and figures.
Yeah, I found Stoicism through poker play, as I'm a poker player, and one podcast I listened to mentioned Epictetus and said, hey, if you want to improve your mental game in poker, go look towards Stoicism. So from there, I dived in, went down the rabbit hole, read the Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and many of the modern books after. That's the quick story there. Favorite Stoicism writers and figures? Yeah, I really like the 3 I just mentioned, and more modern. Massimo Pigliucci I've chatted with before. He was on my podcast. He was formerly involved in many atheist groups too, but now he's more focused on Stoicism. Kai Whiting is another figure I've chatted with on my podcast as well. With Donald Robertson is the host of a Facebook Stoicism group, and he also does work on Stoicism and cognitive behavioral therapy.
Qasim is saying, so it's everything that doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Like, is that the summary of the?
It could make you stronger, because there can be a lot of things that don't kill you that would just be like great inconveniences. For instance, if you were just exiled and trapped in some prison for the rest of your life, that's not necessarily going to make you stronger. That would be a dispreferred thing. Although some people have come out of prison and felt better because of the experience, or otherwise learned something from it. There's
it's still,
Stockdale, for instance, was captured in Vietnam War times, and he persisted through it and credited Stoicism for his mental fortitude throughout that.
It's still an opportunity for you to exercise your mind and how you react to things, no matter how bad. Okay, so I according to Stoics, again, I'm gonna challenge that soon. Mike is saying, I agree, your life becomes more meaningful when you take risks.
And I would say good risks or calculated risks, because just saying like, oh, LOL, a new cryptocurrency's out, I'm just going to put everything into it and take a risk. Like, I don't think that would be a great thing to do. But it's just, just thinking more carefully and having this premeditation about things before we get involved in something that can be of negative consequence.
I don't think the major theme of Stoic philosophy is about like taking it's not about, it's mostly about things that you don't have a control over and not letting them affect you, right? Like, it's not about things that you took calculated risk over those, because those things are in your control. So you should be wise about them, and you should try to avoid harming yourself if it is in your control, right? I think Stoic philosophy is mostly about things that are not in your control. Like if a hurricane happens, I keep wanting to say disease, but a lot of times if you do get a disease, it's because you didn't exercise and eat healthy. But let's say you get sick because
there's some like gray areas,
car accident or a hurricane or something that wasn't in your control. Those kind of events that happens, if you had no control over it, it's a waste of your happiness to try to you shouldn't be upset about it, right? You shouldn't let that control you, like, or something like that.
And like shouldn't be or shouldn't do this. Like, we might feel that reaction, so in time we're to try to move away from that. We're not going to let it completely overcome and demolish us. Like betrayal is a big thing, right? Like, we had this great friend for 15 years and then we found out that they were stealing money from us. Well, okay, we're going to feel upset, and so say that's okay, but what are you going to do going forward is the question. And should we let that really take over our lives for the next 15 years and like harbor this great revenge? That's going to be counterproductive for sure. Even some of the writings of Seneca talk about death and writing letters of consolation to a woman who lost a loved one and saying, yes, it's expected that you'll be mourning, but just don't be doing it for the rest of your life. And you could, again, yes, use this as an opportunity to move forward. Think of those great memories you've had. Think of that. Think of the person on a regular basis even, but don't be mourning forever.
There seems to be this constant focus in Stoic philosophy on trying to separate the things that you are in control of and things that you aren't in control of. Like, this is like identifying the things that happen to you because of your actions and the things that happen to you that you had no say in. And by being able to completely separate these from each other, then you spend your time and mind on the things that you can control and not worry about the things that happen, no matter how bad or how good it is. The things that happen to you that you didn't have any say in, you have to just treat them as, this is just life, right? You could, like, if you go from being extremely rich to being extremely poor because of a bad decision, you treat that differently than if you go from being rich to very poor because something that was in no control of you at all. Like, these are completely separate. Like, people treat them emotionally. People usually react to these things in the same level of, but in Stoic philosophy, these are not even comparable. Like, is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Sure.
Okay. Razum, this is a comment, not a question, saying you aren't even allowed to grieve more than 3 days. That's not true. That really depends on the type of Muslims and the branch of Islam that you're talking about. In fact, there's many Shia Muslims are obsessed with grieving and mourning all the time. So it really
I've been
depends.
watching a lot of majlis that say the exact opposite.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, these are the kind of generalizations about Islam that you should try to avoid. Maggie is saying, it's one of my pet peeves when people I don't know on Instagram ask me for money. I only donate money to organizations with website. I don't know, how's this relevant to Stoic? Oh, okay. Oh, maybe it was
pet peeves or religions asking for donations.
I don't know how this. Okay, maybe it was a response to something you said earlier. Saying, don't blame me. It was okay, fine. God, they claim God told them. Okay, okay, so I'm gonna start now. I'm gonna focus on some of the issues I have. Okay, ready? This is the end of
part 1.
The end. Destroyed. Headline.
I'm just trying. By the way, I'm kidding, because I think there's a lot of value in this, but still,
this is what I do for fun.
Yeah. So I do think, like, the expectation of people, like, if you look at a lot of people who are Stoics, they keep wanting to promote this idea that, okay, like, this happens, you don't emotionally, you don't react to it, you don't get angry, you just accept it. And I think, like, I mean, this is not an appeal to nature, okay, but just because everything that is natural doesn't mean that it's good. It's also true that nature has provided us with some tools that are beneficial. Okay, so it's not a black and white thing. Right? There are some people that say something is natural, therefore it's good. Obviously, that's an appeal to nature fallacy.
Arsenic.
Yeah, but it's also true. But it's also true that nature has provided us with some tools that is helpful. Okay, it's not that the appeal to nature fallacy doesn't come out of nowhere, right? And one of those tools is that the anger or sadness that you feel is nature's way of helping you learn from your mistakes, right? So numbing that out completely could slow down your progress. Sometimes it's, so you could, like, we're not very good at identifying things that are in your control and things that are not in your control, right? A lot of, like, Stoics, for example, that have become really good at being Stoics, they have become too good at being Stoic. As in, like, things that happen to them that maybe if they got upset over it, that they did get angry over it, it would have been more likely for them to learn from it and avoid those same things happening to them in the future faster. Do you know what I mean? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Stoicism is saying, okay, we're going to have these emotions. We'll feel anger, you mentioned. We'll feel grief, and that's okay. But the question is, what are you going to do about it? They're not going to say, okay, we're going to be completely absent from anger. And I don't even think they put that as an ideal. They talk about this idea of the Stoic sage, like, what would the perfect model look like? And they're saying, like, well, one of those probably hasn't even been around, or if you would see them, maybe it'd be like 1 in 10,000 years, like one person in that amount of time. So there will still be that tinge of anger. There still will be that grief. Seneca, for instance, talks about embarrassment or some anxiety, and that the most polished speaker in the world might still go up to that podium and feel that little bit of stage fright. And they can work to try to reduce that, but it probably won't go away completely because it's just part of the human condition. So we're not saying be completely absent from emotions. We don't want those feelings at all, but it's rather, what do we do with those feelings when they come up? That's the real question.
Susie?
This Fish Mountain is saying nature has provided us with some beneficial tools. A good example, orgasms, which actually leads me to the question, how did Stoics tackle sexuality?
Wait, I'm not done with my objection, though. Okay, fine. Let's go to Susanna's question, and then I'm going to continue with my objection.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't recall too much of it, although there is talk about avoiding the heights of desire, that it can be very bad to compromise your character and prioritize, oh, well, I just want to be all about looks and fame and money, and I just want to have this like relationship that doesn't really amount to too much. And in going along with the talks of friendships or partnerships or relationships, we're looking for these mutually beneficial arrangements where we're going to learn from someone else, that we're going to be able to share our deepest thoughts and feelings and life and whatever with another person. There's this talk of a really deep friendship within Stoicism, at least for our closer friends. I don't think it's reasonable to be that open with like 100 people. And do we really have that much time on our hands? Probably not. But for our close friends and relationships, that we should strive to be open with them and learn to mutually benefit each other. But I don't recall too much talk about sexuality in the text, although there is warning of, again, compromising your character, and talk of like the sexual experience could be very overrated in many cases. So
you're telling me that they are pro horny jail.
All right.
I'm childish. I'm sorry.
No, that's good.
Continue.
Wait. Okay. No, I don't think they did talk much about sex and Stoic philosophy.
Not too much. Marriage comes up in one of the chapters from Epictetus. He has a chapter called On the Cynic Calling, which is talking about people who, as I mentioned before, are more aesthetic, more not looking for possessions at all, and was talking about marriage. And there's this societal idea he talks about, that all men should be husbands, all men should marry. And he's saying, well, maybe that's not the calling for everyone, and that we can find fulfillment outside of that. And that having children might not be the best way to go. Maybe we can benefit society at large rather than focusing on the one or two.
Yeah, I do find something that I don't like about Stoic philosophy is that it's mostly based on principles rather than consequences. It's like, these are the virtues that you have to improve just because they are virtues, and these are the principles that we abide by, like regardless of what happened. I think focusing on consequences is where I get my morality from. So that's a problem I have with it. So going back to what I was saying, Razam is saying sometimes it's useful to be angry. Anger can fuel revolutions. Imagine a Stoic Iranian rebellion would be ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that the problem with this is that, like, Stoic philosophy acts so much like you're a calculating machine, right? That you don't let anger fuel you, but you just do the right things because you have made a calculated decision based on your wisdom to do these things, to avoid harm, to make life better. But the thing is that humans don't work like that. Humans are not like this algorithm that you just submit, like, here are the best things to do, and therefore, like, for example, let's use other examples, not anger, but let's use diet and dating, right? For example, when it comes to diet, okay, like, I have to reduce my calorie intake and I will lose weight. That. Are you going to do it? No, you have to trick your mind into some punishment, some rewards, because you're not just a calculating machine. You're an emotional creature, and you need to work with, like, okay, so I'm going to eat these low calorie, high but filling foods that is going to make me feel full. Like, you have to figure out how your mind works emotionally, right? For example, with dating, you're like, oh, I have to, like, be confident and not simp for every girl that I see, and that showing confidence will make women, like, more attracted to me, right? You could be like, okay, this is the proper behavior, but you can't just, like, you're not gonna be able to, if you don't feel confident, you're not gonna be able to show confidence. If you're like, oh, I shouldn't be simping for everybody that I meet, well, you're still gonna do it because you're desperate. You have to be like, actually stop just because this is the right action. That doesn't mean you're gonna do it. You actually have to stop being desperate. You don't have to, there are techniques, like the ways you actually become more confident instead of just acting more confident, right? So just knowing the right actions is not gonna make you move in the right direction. So when it comes to like bringing this back to the Stoic philosophy, like, again, learning and improving and trying to avoid your mistakes, just because you're wise enough to know, okay, I need to do this to make more money, I need to do this to avoid this problem, that knowing it is not going to be enough. Maybe anger is what the fire that you need to light under your butt to actually, you need that anger to actually get you moving, like to actually do the things that you know that you should be doing. But go ahead.
Yeah, they say anger has a lot of downsides in that it can really lead to us losing our composure, that we might take actions just out of desperation or out of revenge or out of some of these other things. And was talking about Achilles, how Achilles lost his temper and look what happened to him and all this. Like, we wouldn't want anger to be the preferred method. Okay, we might feel some anger if we see an injustice of sorts. We might want to take action by maybe appealing to government. If you think of some people like Nelson Mandela, for instance, who was just vocal about his criticisms. I think one misinterpretation of Stoicism is pacifism, that, oh, we're just going to give up and not do anything. You're not saying that, which is good.
That's not my objection. My objection.
Right. I'm saying you're not saying that, right? But we could still take charge, and we could still influence change without being angry individuals. Like, what would you prefer? Like, cooler heads around a conference table talking about a strategy or a plan, or like, oh, I'm gonna be angry about this, like, like, oh, this is such a terrible thing, we need to do this thing right now, or like they're being impulsive about it, right? Like, I'm not thinking of anger as a positive thing in many respects. I often see it as a negative.
Yeah, but doesn't mean that it's always a negative. I don't think you could get many people to take, you need motivation, right? Just because you need something to get people, like, do something about it. Just because, again, I understand that Stoic philosophy does not promote, like, a lot of people think that Stoic philosophy means you're passive, right? Oh, life things just happens in life, so don't do anything about it. No, that's what the Stoic philosophy constantly tells you, that you need to do the right things, you need to change your environment, you need to make improvements, without letting the things that happen that are bad affect you emotionally. That doesn't mean that you're not letting it affect you emotionally. That doesn't mean that Stoic philosophy is telling you not to do anything about it. It still teaches you that you need to be active. You need to be an active participant in trying to make your life better. You have to be an active participant in trying to make the life of people around you better. You strive for wisdom, for justice, for all of that stuff. So it's not a pacifist philosophy. However, I do think, like, it underestimates how much action comes from emotion. Like, I do think, like, a lot of people, a lot of intellectuals discount the role of emotions as a motivation that needs to be part of the calculation, right? Just because emotions themselves don't give you the right, like, are not good in analyzing what the conclusion should be. Emotions are really, really bad at trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong. They're really bad, but
I like this. This is making the case.
No, they are, but however, they are still very useful as a motivating factor, not as an analyzing factor. Like, if you use your emotions to figure out, like, this is wrong, this is bad, this is good, this is this is the action that we need to take. If you use your emotions for that, then you're not using your emotions correctly. But if you use your emotions, if you use your logic for coming up with the conclusions, then I think emotions still have a role into actually motivating you to do the things that you actually know that you use your wisdom to know that they are the right thing to do.
But is this the preferred way to go about things? Like, we want anger to be like the cornerstone of, we've had many movements in the United States, for instance, like getting smoking out of most restaurants, right? Like, okay, well, here are the arguments. Here's why we think it's not beneficial for health, and it's exposing other people to toxins. So maybe we should just have all the restaurants be non-smoking, and people lay out their cases and the change happens. So was there really, like, a case of, like, outrage or anger that comes with that? Like, we can sense an injustice. We could say, hey, there's something wrong with the current state of things, so let's go ahead and try to make that change. Yeah, but it wasn't like a mob that showed up at the restaurants and, like, you need to do this, and like they're being crazy about it. I don't know.
I mean, technically, there's emotions behind every one of these actions, because at some point you care about people not suffering, you care about people not getting cancer because of smoking. And I'm not saying make anger the cornerstone, but it does. I do think it's a useful tool in your toolkit. Again, most of us are not emotion, like we're not robots that we could separate, like just like take action without having any strong feelings about it. Most of the actions that we take is based on strong feelings that we have about things. Like if you don't get angry about things, even if you think like, okay, let's say like there's some injustice somewhere in the world, right? You're not going to get that many people to even like, okay, how can we stop this injustice, right? Let's say you're wise enough, like one of the virtues of Stoic philosophy is to be very wise. So you're wise enough to know that this is how you get rid of this injustice. And you also, one of your virtues is to promote justice, okay? But are you really going to get that many people to get up and actually try to stop this injustice if they're not angry about this injustice? It's hard to mobilize enough resources and people behind it unless you get angry at injustice.
Yeah, I think even with the modern atheism movement, or maybe something like 10 years ago anyway, where so many people were saying that, well, what's the charge here? We're going with facts and reason and logic, and that's really the banner that we need to go with. That here are the arguments from the religious. Here's why we think they're wrong. I was not such a fan of some people calling themselves like, oh, this is the reasons that atheists are angry. Like you could see the injustice, but hey, we have the facts and reason and logic on our side, right? Or look, we have these laws and these laws are being violated in some way. So let's like take them to courts and go about this. And we've had some success with that. Just this want of being equally represented, or a want of, okay, we don't want religious education in public schools. We want church and state to be separate, right? Like we don't need anger to motivate any of those calls to do that.
I'm not convinced. I think that we need some anger. We don't need anger.
Studies, I mean, that show that anger only takes you so far. It's actually empathy that will influence the tipping point in the society.
Yeah, I'm not saying just rely on anger. I'm just saying it is part of the tools in your toolkit, right? Like it needs to be a factor. Okay. I mean, it's again, I don't want to do an appeal to nature fallacy, but just not ignoring the fact that this is part of the feelings that arises is like, let me actually apply Stoic philosophy to Stoic philosophy to destroy it. Okay. Here's the thing. If you experience anger, that is sometimes out of your control. So according to Stoic philosophy, you shouldn't try to control things that you can't control. So you should just let anger.
They say that we can be mindful about our emotions. And right. Epictetus talks about how he considered himself a very angry person. And what he did was just he went about this thing of being very deliberate about it, that once he felt like some of the warning signs, or once he started to feel a little bit angry, that he would try to back himself away from a situation, step away, reflect, and try to do better next time. And over time, he became less of an angry person. Although the anger wasn't completely eliminated, I don't know if it's the case that we can completely eliminate some emotions. Maybe, okay, there's that tinge that we might feel, but that's okay, but we're not going to have it overtake us.
I have a better advice than Stoic philosophy. I think sometimes you should just let yourself get angry. Just be aware of it. You don't even have to, like, some people are like, oh, you can't eliminate it, but you can reduce it. Sometimes I'm thinking like, you know what? Don't even try to reduce it. I think anger has a healing. There's some healing when it comes to, like, don't let it control you, but let it, like, just notice it and see it and be aware of it. For
the catharsis of it.
Yes, like for example, if something happens that makes you angry, I think what you need to do with that anger is not to let it control you, but you need to be able to leave room for it to express itself, or for you to forgive yourself. Here's the thing. I think like there's this constant struggle for Stoics to crush the anger inside them. And sometimes just like, I feel like instead of like killing the anger, just putting a leash on it and observing it, just the act of observing it and noticing that it's there, lets the anger do its job, which is a healing thing. Like it's a healing reaction. It's a healing, like something bad happens to you, and you letting yourself go through some anger makes the healing process go through faster, right? But acknowledging it and observing it makes it so that this anger is not going to take control over you and come out and make you do things that you're eventually going to regret. And it also it's also going to help you make it go away faster, but by being so self-aware that you're noticing yourself, noticing the anger rise, noticing the anger, what effect it's having on you, it's going to, so you're going to get the healing benefit. It's going to go away faster by noticing it. And I think that you're also going to put it in a place by not letting it control, by noticing it, you're going to make sure it doesn't control you. But you don't try to eliminate it, and you also forgive yourself, because as a Stoic, I think like you go through some guilt sometimes by letting yourself be angry. But sometimes you're like, you know what? You sometimes, sometimes I think like, you know what? I was justified to be angry over this, and I'm not gonna take any points away from myself for being angry over this. This was a justified anger, right? So what do you think?
Yeah, guilt is an interesting thing, as we can have some of that, but we can ultimately realize that it's not overly a helpful thing, that we can't change what's happened in the past, but we could recognize it. And if we feel those feelings of guilt, well, perhaps that has some kind of restorative thing with it too, that we recognize in this moment of humility that, okay, we've made a mistake. Hey, we can do better in the future. So maybe that guilt could be replaced with something like humility, and maybe that anger could be replaced with something else as well, and not have it overtake us.
I think, well, I'm not letting it overtake me, because I'm observing it and I'm letting it do its job, right?
Right, and I think that's the good response, to be mindful, sure.
Yes, better than I think like if you apply Stoic philosophy to your anger, right? If you apply Stoic philosophy, this is a self-contradiction in Stoic philosophy, because Stoic philosophy teaches you to just accept things, right? One thing I want to accept is I'm going to accept myself, and I'm going to accept the anger that rises when I see something that deserves anger, right? So I'm not just accepting things that happen outside of I control my anger, and sometimes that control in my anger means that some people, like a lot of people's understanding of controlling anger means like, oh, you don't let yourself get angry. No, sometimes my control of my anger is that I dial it up intentionally. Like it's like being in control of your anger. That doesn't mean you don't get angry. Sometimes I'm like, you know what? I am in control of my anger, and I decide intentionally to dial it up right now because this is the proper response. And I accept myself, and I notice this anger rising, and I accept it. This is something that is happening, just like a hurricane that happens to you, and you accept it, part of Stoic philosophy. This internal anger that is rising from within me, I look at it like a hurricane that happens in nature. This is also something that happens in nature, and I also accept this. What do you think?
Oh, I'm having a flashback to so many conversations. No, I'm angry, and this is justified. And I'm
all the like, SJWs in the streets, right?
I'm like, I'm in a hurricane right now.
Yeah. So
right. These days, just to be clear, these days, anti SJWs are give me more reasons to be angry than SJWs. But yeah.
Yeah. So the idea of accepting things, the Stoics talk about, we can have a lot of desires, and we can have some automatic thoughts, like desire for wealth or lust over someone, and like we can get so stuck on this and have this being a priority. So should we just accept this, like, oh, I want to eat like 5,000 calories a day and forget about exercise, like I just feel like I want to lay down and stuff? Like the Stoics will say sometimes the feelings that we have aren't productive things, and we should try to reduce those in some ways. And occasionally maybe we'll have that cheat day or that piece of cheesecake or whatever, maybe that's not a horrible thing. So maybe anger in some sense can be like that too, as you're saying that, okay, well, if we can moderate it, if it can have some kind of good outcome to it in a little way and not have it overtake us, then I suppose that could be a thing. As I think the classics though would say, like, no, just do away with it altogether. It doesn't have that beneficial thing. It has more downsides than positives, I think is what they would say.
Robert is saying, is Armin conflating passion with anger? Knowing you're logically and reasonably correct and by itself prompt action against injustice. No.
Hi, Robert.
Hi, Robert. No, I don't. I'm not conflating them. I'm talking about anger, not just any kind of passion. Anger itself. Anger itself is like this is a thing that we are born with. This is like hardwired in our brains. It's a way to you react to some negative effects. It's negative events that there's agency behind it. Okay, so negative events that doesn't have agency behind it leads to sadness and misery. Negative events that there's agency behind it, naturally your reaction to it is anger. Okay, so, and I think that anger could even be this sounds contradictory, that anger sometimes is even enjoyable, right? Because it's healing. You feel the healing. You feel this thing that happened to you, and there's agency behind it, and you want to direct some anger towards the agent behind that negative event. That is, if you don't use that anger as a calculating tool to figure out what should be done, and only use it as a way for you to emotionally respond to something that emotionally does affect you, it could have healing properties, and it could also motivate you, because like, we're not wired in a way to be like, okay, I'm getting so much satisfaction from knowing I am logically consistent right now here in reacting to this. That is the motivating factor. It's just not as strong. Okay. So I think once you go through a logic filter to make sure that you are in the right, after that, the thing that moves you could be anger. I'm not saying it should always be anger. Sometimes it's like, I don't know, passion for something else. Sometimes it's like sadness. Sometimes it's like lust.
Empathy.
Sometimes it's empathy. But sometimes it's anger. And there's multiple benefiting in tapping, multiple benefits, like healing and also motivation to tapping into your anger. I mentioned lust. One thing that I noticed, like the similarities between what Stoic philosophy teaches you and Islam, here, in my opinion, is that this idea of making lust a taboo desire, right? This is again, trying to also, like in Buddhism, trying to get rid of ego, right? Trying to deny lust, trying to deny ego, pride, trying to deny anger. You can't,
I don't think they're trying to deny it, but rather reduce this and just question about whether it's
but sometimes you don't want to reduce it. Like I just think, like, I don't want to appeal to nature. I just want to say that you can't. Sometimes it's hard to stand against your nature. Just going, like, acting like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna ignore my lust, or you know what? I'm gonna ignore ego. As in, like, it's, to me, it sounds like you're just like a train is coming at you, and you just stand in front of the train and hold your hand like this to stop it. Like, I don't appeal to nature, but don't deny nature. Nature is a powerful force. Anger is a natural reaction that you have to think. And when I say it's a natural reaction, I'm not saying everything.
It doesn't mean it's good or bad, right?
But it is a force of nature. It is powerful. Okay. That doesn't make it inherently good, but because it's wired in your brain, it is sometimes, like, resisting that will have more damage, internally more damaging than just letting it do its thing. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, the lust question is an interesting one too. And one thing within Stoicism is they say that don't just be completely reliant on the ancient teachers, that we should update our thoughts as we learn more about the world. As I know there are modern movements that are just completely against pornography, particularly like Christian movements that are just saying it's going to completely overtake you and you're going to get into this porn addiction and There's some men's groups also that talk about what they call
Maybe
nofap, of not watching porn at all.
The P word, can we like reduce the number of times?
Oh,
like I
okay,
think YouTube doesn't like that if we keep using it.
So some adult videos, some people are against the adult videos, and
there's also the sex worker exclusionary radical feminists.
Yeah. So in some cases with the adult videos, okay, well, at some point, a person, if they can control themselves about it and not just be like lying in bed watching videos for hours and hours, not accomplishing anything like that, obviously nobody wants that. But if they can do it with moderation and be okay, which I think is the main thing that Stoicism calls for, it's like, well, if you go to a party and you drink some wine, that's okay, but as long as you don't just get completely drunk and embarrass yourself and ruin the whole event for everyone. So moderation, I think, is a very important thing. Yeah, so maybe that could be something with anger as well, to try to get some kind of middle to things, as long as it's not overtaking us, as long as we can recognize it when it's happening and not make rash decisions, then maybe it's not as bad.
All right, so we hit the 1 hour mark. AJ came here late, and she's saying that she wants to go and watch this from the beginning. Yeah, do it. It was good. But before we go, Justin, you said you have a podcast that talks about Stoic philosophy. Two podcasts.
Yeah.
Why two?
One podcast is about Stoicism. It's the Stoic Solutions podcast. I've had many guests on the show, including musicians, authors, philosophers, teachers. And my second podcast is about travel and credit cards and finance, the Hurdy-Gurdy Travel Podcast. And of course, I'm with the group Atheists for Liberty as well. So lots of different hats while not wearing a hat.
So for the people that are interested in your takes on Stoic philosophy, what do they search for? What's the
Stoic Solutions Podcast.
Stoic Solutions Podcast. And Atheists for Liberty for your atheist activism, and also your travel podcast is called what?
The Hurdy-Gurdy
Travel Podcast, like the musical instrument.
All right, fantastic. Hey, by the way, do you want to get the audio for this discussion and release it on your podcast? If you want, you could do that as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, that could be something. Cool. It's good to see a lot of people in the chat. So thanks for your questions, and the Baby Yoda fans in the chat.
Oh yeah. All right.
No Yoshi fans though, huh?
Yeah, I noticed that. It's okay.
What are you guys talking about? Are you not allowed to say that on YouTube or something?
I think the P one is worse. Anyways, okay, guys, this was a patron meeting with one of our Atheist Republic's patrons. So if anyone else is interested in having a discussion with us, reach out to us on Patreon. Link to scheduling a call with us is in the description, and also subscribe to our newsletter so you could get our blasphemous art for free. So cool. Justin, any final remarks before we end this?
All right, thanks for having me. Hopefully, even if you don't like some elements of Stoicism or have some disagreements, that you can find something helpful from the philosophy and have it help your life on a daily basis.
Yeah, I actually like, by the way, Stoic philosophy. So it's I'm actually looking more and more into it. Like, I don't want to seem like I was. But I have to, I can't help it. Okay,
it's just in my nature.
Yeah, I can be quite the contrarian too in many senses. Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna end the stream.